Did Democrats blow it on the government shutdown? There's a deal to reopen the government in the works, and at least one Democratic senator says the whole resistance plan was a failure, never should have happened. What does Zohran Mamdani have to do with any of this? That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is your libertarian review of news and culture from the editors of Reason Magazine and Sometimes Friends. I am Peter Suderman. I'm your host, and today I am joined by Matt Welch and Katherine Mangu-Ward. Nick Gillespie just couldn't make it. Nick, Nick, I want to ask you an opening question, but you're not there at all. Okay. All right. So here's the debate amongst the Democrats. They're kind of divided on this, right? The shutdown was a product of inter-democratic factional squabble. And you've got Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. Again, I just wish Nick was here. I want to ask him about his favorite Democrat, who says this whole thing was a failure. It never should have happened. He's been against it this whole time. And then you've got Senator Chris Murphy, who says the deal to reopen the government is a mistake that, quote, will make Trump stronger, not weaker. Katherine Mangu-Ward, which side do you fall on, if any?
I refuse to pick a side between those two people, and you can't make me. Right. The shutdown was a comedy of errors, and as I have said on this podcast before, it makes me absolutely furious to have been against a shutdown in any kind of way. I love it when the government isn't governmenting, and I did not love this one, and it was messy and gross, and it is still messy and gross because we're gonna have to do it all again in January, even if the shutdown really ends.
Yeah, Matt Welch, how excited are you for the upcoming January shutdown? Because right now this deal it's a continuing resolution plus a minibus. You know what that means? You know exactly what that means, right?
Short buses for everyone.
Sure do. Short bus
for... You want to explain CR plus minibus with no riffs till January?
It's just a short-term continuing resolution, cromnibus thing, up or down vote. You do the thing, promise to do maybe have a thing to deliver the thing up on.
Man, this is a stroke. This is an expert in public policy right here,
sir. The stroke is what happens every day in Washington, D.C., where I refuse to live for a reason, and one of them is that I don't want to know. The Replacements sang on their classic "Let It Be" record, and since there's three of us, you're going to get a lot of this. I've seen your video. We don't want to know. That is what I feel like we have as human beings. You know, only a limited amount of brain processing capacity, only a limited amount of time on this earth to have precious seconds to hug our loved ones and to think about that. Devoting some of that precious time and processing energy on having opinions about who won the shutdown in Washington seems to be a little bit misspent. I would point out for those of people who really do want to pursue that, that's fine. I'm not telling you can't. But that as far as I know, there hasn't been a single case of a government shutdown in the modern Gingrich, and since the Gingrich era in which the shutter downers got what they wanted in any meaningful sense, or that it changed the trajectory in any measurable sense of the underlying issue that people said was at hand. That is absolutely going to be the case in this issue. And meanwhile, the machinery of how government works, which is that we spend ever higher amounts of money with an ever greater share of that money being basically transfer payments. And so you just try to make politics over what kind of monster you are to maybe shut down the transfer payment for a half a second. That's what politics looks like until we get to the point where there are responsible people in Congress, which I don't think is going to happen for at least 10 years. So welcome to the never-ending future, the end, forever.
Yeah, so I realized this year I've been living in Washington for 20 years as of this summer, with a short-term excursion to New York and a couple of summers in Boston, but otherwise, basically my entire life since I graduated from college. And now I am the kind of person who just knows what CR plus minibus with no riffs till January means, not just for the operation of the government, but for my commute. It's like the weather, right? It's like a thing you just kind of, it's like, I got to check the acronyms today and see which ones are like what the traffic is going to be like on getting to work.
It's technically, it's CR plus minibus plus no riffs till January plus delays on the red line.
And also, And also, if they extend this, we just get to do, right, like it's that again. And in fact, this is the thing I want to ask you about. The more serious point is if libertarians got anything out of this shutdown, it was the RIFs. That's reduction in force for those who don't speak Washington and don't treat Congress as their weather, right? Reductions in force. And so there were thousands of government employees who were laid off as part of this. And all of those are going to be undone. And in addition, the Trump administration is going to be prohibited from doing more of them through the end of January. And in addition to that, if this CR is further extended, which keeps happening, then then they won't be able to do any more RIFs after that as well. So the clearest thing that libertarians were going to get from this, the reduction in federal employees, is now not just not happening, but also being undone and prohibited, at least for the foreseeable future, Katherine.
But we also didn't really get it anyway, in the sense that one reason I think that Republicans have allowed that to be a component of the current deal is because the RIFs were always going to be tied up in the courts. They were always, a bunch of them were always going to get undone anyway. And they were theater and test cases, but they weren't actually real cuts. They were like Schrodinger's cuts. And this just like opens the box.
So doesn't that just mean that like we're back at the status quo? Like what was this shutdown about? I mean, this was like a Seinfeld shutdown, a shutdown about nothing, right? This is like the end of Burn After Reading, the great Coen Brothers movie of Washington. Like there's this incredible coda in that movie where you got two CAA guys who've been kind of observing this bizarre situation that's been going on that doesn't really make any sense, where everybody's just doing their own thing and it's all totally insane. And they're like, what was the lesson here? Says the top guy played by J.K. Simmons. And he's like, well, I guess the lesson is let's not do that again. But I don't know what we did. It's really hard to say. Hey, we've got Jerusalem Demsas on the show.
Hi. I'm so sorry to join last minute. I got into a bike accident, but I made it in.
Oh, no.
I am okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, no.
We were just making a bunch of...
I'm a little bit of a crazy person on my e-bike, and like the car... I'm totally fine. I was wearing my helmet and everything, and it was like, okay, but my mind blanked, and I should have called you guys, so I apologize.
Wow. I'm glad you're okay. Katherine has some experience with this. In her case, it was a scooter, and it was Justin Amash's fault.
Oh my God, really?
She was listening to Justin Amash.
I was listening to a Justin Amash podcast, and it was raining, and I was on an e-scooter, and I hit a pothole and went down and shattered my kneecap. So I'm glad that is not what happened to you.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. No. This was actually the car turning right without signaling, but I was also going like 17 miles an hour, so maybe I should have slowed down a bit. But it was fine. I like hit it, and then I'm really okay.
Okay, so is this, we were just talking about the shutdown.
Okay.
Is this a metaphor for the shutdown? A lot of chaotic stuff happened, but nothing changed?
Yes.
Yes.
I honestly, to me, it's very, very hard for me to get a sense of like how much strategy is going on in these kinds of negotiations versus various people seem to have not thought through why they were shutting down the government and then like sort of realized that there was like some pain going on in their constituencies, particularly in Virginia, which is what you see with Tim Kaine. And like you don't actually see like the execution of an end game happening. Like there's going to be a vote on some of the healthcare provisions. That's not really satisfying anyone's actual long-term concerns with whether power that the Trump administration is holding or with the healthcare provisions that everyone is concerned about with the ACA. Like that to me is like genuinely like an indication that there's not a lot of strategic thinking going on within the Democratic Senate caucus.
Okay, so just we should back up here and introduce you for people who don't know who Jerusalem Demsas is. You're great. You are the editor of The Argument, which is a new magazine on Substack that you have described as being for libbing out. And I kind of think of The Argument as a publication that is interested in intrafactional Democratic and sort of left of center arguments, as well as kind of being, it's the abundance agenda, the magazine. Is that a fair description, or would you put it differently?
I like hearing how people hear us because we're about 2 months old, so it's nice to hear how people are experiencing our work so far. I think of us as reimagining liberalism for the 21st century and thinking of liberalism as broadly defined, not just left of center. So we do engage in a lot of like intra-factional fights on the left across the political spectrum, but also I think a big part of our focus is what's going on with the post-liberal right. How is it that we can think about how the center right and libertarian right and people who care about classically liberal values around, individualism and basic rights and things like that, how can that be the future of the right in this country is also a big focus of ours. But the abundance agenda is a big part of that. I really do believe that a prerequisite to liberalism is economic growth and abundance of basic resources. I think that like scarcity is a real problem for liberalism writ large. Like when people feel like really important parts of their lives are scarce, whether it's housing or it's energy or it's jobs or whatever it is, they become very hostile to basic liberal values around free markets, around immigration, around just like freedom of movement in general. I mean, we saw this at the end of the 2024 presidential campaign when Vance really leaned into the idea that immigrations were raising home prices. And I thought that was like a clear example of how easy it is to weaponize scarcity towards illiberal ends. Vance knows, and everyone knows, that they're not like the demand that immigrants bring to housing markets is nowhere near enough to explain the rise in home prices. But like it is a convenient explanation to point at someone outside of your coalition when things are going badly and there is a scarcity. So to me, it's like, how do we remedy that? Abundance is a clear answer to that question, and it's a big part of what we do.
Okay, so since you are our Democratic Party intrafactional whisperer here,
Sure.
like this is something that probably you just sort of are more invested in, that your world talks about and thinks about more than ours does. I started before you got on, before you came on the show, and again, I'm so sorry about the accident. I'm glad you're okay. Glad you were able to make it. I started by just sort of saying it seems like there's two views within the Democratic Party here. There's the John Fetterman view, which is this whole thing was a failure. It was stupid from the get-go. We never should have done it. And then there's the Chris Murphy view, which is that the deal to reopen the government is a mistake, that the quote is, will make Trump stronger, not weaker. Don't do it. And I see folks in your world who you've aligned with, at least on some things, like Ezra Klein, basically staking out the Chris Murphy view, saying this was a mistake. Where do you fall? What do you think about sort of the deal to reopen things here?
Yeah, I mean, my view is this. I think that as it surprised like most political commentators how much the public was clearly blaming Republicans and the Trump administration for the shutdown. That is like quite unprecedented. Usually the shutdown is blamed on the outside party that refuses to provide sufficient votes to open the government. And so to me, I think that was surprising. I think many people were surprised by this. I think once it became clear that the blame was going towards the Trump administration, Republicans writ large, the question has to be like, what is the end game here, right? From my perspective, I think that like the goal of the shutdown is to push public opinion against basic illiberal actions being taken by the government in a way that is actually useful for I think left of center candidates to be able to actually succeed. And so to me, things like the government is just killing people in other countries' waters or in international waters. Like these are powers that like do not exist within the government's purview. Like they don't have the right to be doing this. But this is not what Democrats did. They did not do the Jerusalem Demsas liberalism strategy. They did a healthcare strategy, which again seemed to be working. But then it gets me kind of confused by the whole situation because like they don't actually have any wins on the healthcare really at all, other than like a promise for there to be a vote at some point, which seems to me quite weak, especially from how the Democratic senators who are supporting this are talking about it. So my perspective of this is this. It's like, I think that if we're grading the Democrats on did they get some good news Did they get some good news attention? Did they get some positive attention? Were they able to leverage this in the midterms? Particularly, I think in Virginia, where you saw massive margins for Abigail Spanberger up and down the ticket, really, really taking over not just the top of the ticket, but all the way down, even from very unpopular candidates relative to Spanberger, were able to really eke out like big wins. Clearly, it was a win there, and so Democrats have won on that. In terms of like ending it, no one is articulating to me like when this ends. Like, I don't think Trump is going to cave on massive policy priorities. So like, is the Chris Murphy view of the world that we just do this for months and months, or what is the end of that situation? Seems quite unclear to me. So it's hard for me to grade them there. So in that end, I take like kind of the Tim Miller view of this at the Bulwark, who's had the perspective that like, this was a win for Democrats, and it's may as well end now if it's going to end at any point. And this is going to come up again. They're going to be able to use a strategy again to get and exact more attention against the Republican Party.
I also love the vision that you just gave me of like, okay, we have the Jerusalem Demsas like vision of liberalism that the Democrats could be doing. I was like, yeah, let's have that versus the Katherine Mangu-Ward vision of classical liberalism that the Republicans could be doing. Like, what a beautiful world we would be living in.
If only.
Like the policy debates we wish we were having are so far from what is actually happening out there, which, again, one of the outcomes of this seems to be everyone agrees that they will start again with just a fresh, whole, separate, new debate about the healthcare stuff, I guess, ? Like, that's kind of crazy, right?
So I want to come back to the healthcare stuff in just a minute, but I actually think there might be one real meaningful substantive policy lesson to come out of this that people have kind of glossed over, not here at Reason, but that like has not actually become a bigger part of the debate, except in the sense that people are annoyed by all of these shutdowns or slowdowns, I should say, at the airports because of air traffic control. Matt Welch, do you think maybe there's like a lesson here in like what we should do for how to think about like reforming air traffic control? That like we could, that like something, I don't know, did somebody have a plan for that makes sense that we've been talking about for 50 years?
The lesson is don't do air traffic control reform at the point of a government shutdown gun. Catherine, does that make sense?
Yeah, that was okay. That wasn't your worst.
At all. It's like these plans hatched by the great sainted Bob Poole, who's been working on good public policy for more than half a century, in addition to things related to Reason Magazine and the Reason Foundation. We should join such, crazy radicals like Canada and other people to have a corporatized air traffic control system so it's not dependent on the whims of government. If government is going to work more poorly, and it is. It's just there's no way. I wish Jerusalem all the best. I wish Catherine's mythical classical liberals on the right all the best. They're all great. I want to high five them all. But in the meantime, in the world that we live, it's going to be populist shitheads all over the place. We're going to go from cromnibus to cromnibus. We're going to go from what's the debt clock now? 38 point something. It's going to get to 39 point something by tomorrow morning. Annual government spending is going to go.
Deficits, yeah.
It's
just a big number that keeps getting bigger.
It's all going bigger in that direction. And so the sober work of doing actual policy reform is left to people who are outside the halls of government. If people want to, I think there's one possible good political outcome to all of this stupid nonsense, which is that to the extent that Donald Trump in particular has kind of insisted on that he's in charge of everything, including murder boats in the Caribbean. But not only that, just all the tariffs and the exceptions to the tariffs, and he's just everything good as Trump. He's been accumulating power. And so the fact that he is suffering probably even more than he deserves politically because of this, and because also Democrats did really, really well, better than expected at the ballot box. Maybe this process speeds up the, he's not going to be looming over us forever. And people then start thinking about, okay, what do you do next? And maybe one of the things that you do is those nice reforms by Catherine's people on the right and Jerusalem's on the left. I would hope so. It would be pretty to think so. I think it's not going to happen. And I wish that it would. And if people who want to be serious about this stuff, there are mountains of really good papers and other work that's been done by Bob Poole and by a bunch of other people besides. And I hope there comes a day when people will tap into this very existing practical knowledge to improve something basic before we have a fatal plane crash very near where I live. And I think that's not going to happen. And so we're going to see people dead. The end.
Matt Welch, always predicting murder on this podcast. Okay, so that's the substantive issue that I think sort of has flown under the radar, maybe?
No.
Here on this, right? Like, no. This is the case for air traffic control reform, but that's not what Democrats decided to make this shutdown about, right? Like, they had all of this stuff at Jerusalem. You're like, they should make it about all of Trump's overreaches. Instead, they picked the political issue that always works best for Democrats. You can understand why they made this case. It was that, like, the argument, as I understood it, for the shutdown and then for healthcare was sort of two parts. It was Trump is an unusual president, so we need an unusual response. That's why we do a shutdown. And then what do we do the shutdown about? Well, we got to pick something that's popular, that plays to our strengths. So that's healthcare. In some ways, these are, like, you can see the two-step there. They're kind of not related. And then what they're doing is they're defending or sort of making a case for these expanded Obamacare subsidies, which are subsidies on top of the original Obamacare subsidies, right? This isn't the whole kit and caboodle. This is a sort of a fix to Obamacare that adds over the next decade, if you want to expand them for a full decade, something like $350 billion in costs. And so I'm sort of curious where you come down on those expanded subsidies, which were initially pitched as temporary, which are quite expensive, which are in some ways an admission, I think, even by Democrats, that Obamacare, as it originally passed back in 2010, at least wasn't sort of fully there and maybe even wasn't working very well. Is this the way to run to sort of do healthcare in America, which is patch upon patch upon patch, and every single time it's a couple $100 billion more?
I mean, yes, we've not solved healthcare with Obamacare. There are going to be big problems that go on forever, in part because the health needs of the country are going to change as we see people, for instance, getting older and older. That's going to be a different mix of needs, and it's going to change, the amount of money you want to spend on long-term care or extending the last year of life. There's just lots of things that are going to change all the time. I mean, in these subsidies in particular, I'm very in favor of them. I mean, and a big part of the reason why we need extra subsidies or they're sunsetting is largely because of just budget math. You just wanted the budget to look better. And so that's why they have them expiring. And so you have to re-up them. This is just a trick that everyone plays on both sides of the aisle in order to make their bills look better when they're being scored. But I just think in general, yes, the question for me about whether new policies in healthcare or in any other space are good or not, is just going to be does this pass the best benefit cost analysis? Do these save lives, benefit people's lives enough to justify the cost that we're putting in? To me, I think the answer is clearly yes, and I don't really have a problem with that, especially because I think there's a real Democratic mandate to maintain this. I mean, right now we're seeing healthcare skyrocket again to near the top of people's concerns in this country. I think it's number 2 we saw in the New York Times, in the Argument's recent poll. Sometimes I confuse New York Times and the Argument.
Sure.
Very, very similar outlets. But the Argument, we just put out a recent poll asking people what their top issues are, and healthcare is number 2 among our respondents. And so that to me is indicating that this is a perennial issue for people. I think for my part too, part of why I think that the healthcare is such an important and good issue to focus on, not for Democrats' partisan perspective, but just in general, is that it's a very unifying issue. Everyone needs healthcare. Everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or what your race is or anything like that. Healthcare is a very unifying thing. People are going to die. You're going to get sick. You're going to be disabled at some point in your life. And I think it's a good issue to bring people together. But I do think that more broadly to your points about the shutdown strategy in general, I do think one missing part of this is just feelings about the filibuster. Because at the end of the day, the only reason Democrats have any power whatsoever to do this shutdown is because Republicans don't want to blow up the filibuster. And there's a core group.
Well, Trump does.
And
Trump has been pushing Republicans to blow up the filibuster.
Yeah, and I think
it wasn't Republicans who decided to reopen the government here this week. That was because a handful of Senate Democrats decided now's the time.
Yes. And those handful of Senate Democrats, I think, are overrepresented in the group of Democrats who are concerned about maintaining the filibuster, right? So what's going on right now is that Republicans could easily just pass legislation to keep the government open. They control all 3 branches of government, but Democrats, they need a 60-vote majority in the Senate. And so Democrats had to provide them that threshold. to me, I think like the biggest problem here is the Democrats should have been like, all right, just blow up the filibuster. Like, let's just get this over with. Like, I'm not a fan of the filibuster.
Doesn't that just give Trump what he wants? I mean, isn't the whole point of the shutdown to show that you're doing something, anything, to oppose him? And if your end game is then do what Trump wants you to do, that kind of seems like that's a defeat.
Well, I think there's a question here between, like, of course, like the optics of whether or not people feel like you're just falling into Trump's trap or not, like, I think are up for debate. I'm actually been very I've been surprised, as I mentioned earlier, that this went so well for the Democrats to begin with. But I do think that, like, this question of, like, just give Trump what he wants, I think forcing Republicans to just, like, vote for the things they believe in and not require Democrats to vote for them as well in order for them to pass, like, completely reasonable. Like, I think that, like, the fact that we live in a country where, like, you have a trifecta of one party that can't pass its own policies is, like, insane. And, like, that shouldn't happen. Like, they should get to pass their own policies. They should be responsible for them. Right now, everyone's talking about the current legislative legislative agenda as being the fault of Democrats. But it's like, 8 Democrats voted for this, but like all Republicans voted for it, and yet like Democrats are the one in the hot seat here. I just think it's a weird way to do politics. I think it's a weird way for the government to indicate who's responsible for various actions to the voters.
Well, the filibuster, just kind of by nature, ends up preserving the power of not just of not one party or the other so much as individual senators who would prefer to have a little more power in the system, I think, relative to the alternative of basically being a backbencher in the House where you're just voting for what leadership tells you to. Justin Amash, our Catherine's knee-breaking, Catherine's knee doctor.
Knee shattering.
Yeah, is not a fan.
It wasn't really his fault.
That.
We don't blame him.
All right. We're going to take a break here. And then when we come back, we are going to talk about our post-Mamdani, our new Mamdani, New York world. Post-Mamdani, post-election Mamdani, New York. I don't know what I'm talking about here. Let's take a break. I got it. All right. So last week, Democrats routed Republicans in an off-year election. Most notable victory, of course, was Zohran Mamdani, who won the New York mayoral race. Mamdani is a self-declared Democratic socialist who's proposed free buses, free childcare, ending tracking in schools, a rent freeze, a whole bunch of other stuff. So, Jerusalem, I actually just want to ask you about this because abundance types, the way I kind of understand them, are aligned against the kind of, or at least sort of often opposed to the sort of more socialist, sort of more leftist worldview within the Democratic Party. And they like markets. They like smart economic policies, housing deregulation, better government, right? So how does the abundance world feel about a kind of a free everything democratic socialist becoming the new hotness in the Democratic Party and the avatar of victory and what works?
So I think that there's like a big split that's happening within abundance, which has always been there. I mean, when you think about the roots of YIMBYism, the Yes in My Backyard movement, the pro-housing movement in this country, I mean, it comes out of very liberal spaces in this country, very progressive areas like San Francisco, Boulder, Colorado, Boston, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. I mean, these are not, moderate areas of the country. And these movements are often staffed with people who are very far to the left as well. And so I think the way that you have to think about the divide is that it's not really that abundance is seen as anti-socialist, but it's often been anti the type of leftist that rejects the existence of trade-offs. It is possible, for instance, to be a socialist who cares a lot about housing abundance, to get rid of all the regulatory morass that shackles the government as well as private sector from being able to deliver housing and to deliver energy and to deliver transit projects at cost and at scale. You could imagine that happening. Now, the question is really like, is Mamdani that guy? Like, is that what he's going to do? And this is where I think there's a big divide right now, where a lot of people who are in the abundance movement are very skeptical. They look at his proposals, especially around free buses, and they go, this is not a person who's thinking through the trade-offs properly. If you make buses free, then you end up overcrowding them, taking away resources that could improve reliability and improve consistency and improve safety, et cetera. And other pilots of free bus programs have not gone well. You don't see high quality transit programs around the world being free at cost of at point of service for all the various reasons I've already mentioned. But then you look at other things that Mamdani has done. For instance, he talked about publicly in the New York Times very early on this year that the biggest thing he's changed his mind about is the role of the private market in delivering housing. That is the thing that he sees he's changed his mind about, and that he sees there as being a role for the private market to deliver housing. And that he's also talking to people like Dan Garodnick, Maria Torres Springer, who are both very pro-housing oriented people in New York City, as being a part of his administration. So this is a person who clearly is very, very politically savvy, very smart. And like the question is really going to be like, which of these, within you there are two wolves, Zohran. Like who will you choose? Who will you select? Who will be in charge here? And I think that I'm cautiously optimistic, and the reason I'm cautiously optimistic is because the alternative was Cuomo, who actually was like an out and out NIMBY. Like I think that people don't remember this, but like this man was actively anti-upzoning, actively anti-abundance in many, many respects. Was a kind of old, I mean, he's a moderate, right? But there are a lot of moderate NIMBYs. Like that's actually the predominant way to be a NIMBY is to be a moderate NIMBY. And so the hard part about abundance is how much it doesn't cleave along traditional lines of how politics gets divided. So it's very, very hard sometimes when someone doesn't have a record to know whether they're going to be like, oh, are you going to be like the left version of an abundance mayor? Or are you just going to be another leftist mayor who doesn't understand trade-offs and is going to allow the city to fall into further and further crisis of affordability?
Matt Welch, you live in New York. What do you think about Mamdani's transition team? You've got folks like Springer, who is at least a serious person, not a libertarian, but someone who's like not, a kind of ridiculous character. And then you get Jamal Bowman being put in charge of the education program, right? You get Lena Khan, who the abundance world may have sort of a variety of opinions about her, but like I have described her as when she was, at the FTC and under Biden as the least libertarian prominent figure in Washington in so many ways. And so I look at this transition team and I'll be honest, it doesn't give me as much hope as I think it's giving. Some of this is giving. I am not cautiously optimistic.
You're cautiously pessimistic, or are you just full pessimistic?
I'm
cautiously pessimistic. That's actually right.
Okay. I see nothing but wolves all the way down.
Both of the wolves are just wolves.
If you look at his acceptance speech, which is really interesting, it was late, actually, long after he had been declared the winner, and it was written within an inch of its life. He spent some time, he thought about it. He had some really great lines. He had some really bad lines, too. Got the Eugene Debs right in the first sentence, said he didn't want to hear Andrew Cuomo's name ever again. And you know what? Me too, brother. And a bunch of other things beside. But there was a line in there that speaks to a kind of limitlessness when it comes to government. He said that there is no problem too big that government can't solve or that we won't solve, and there's no problem too small that we won't care about. That is just the most kind of aggressively socialist conception of government I have heard from an elected politician not named like Bernie Sanders in a really, really, really long time. And it's where I live. So I'm kind of I don't like that very much. There are three things I've said before that where you feel the mayor or you feel the local government in your life here, it's going to be schools, it's going to be subway, it's going to be safety. Everything else is sort of window dressing. You get taxes, you get a bunch of other things besides. But like that's as a citizen, everyone feels those things. The schools putting Jamal Bowman, who's an absolute human clown, in charge of the most expensive school district probably in the entire world, more than $40,000 per student. It's the enrollment of K through 12 publicly run schools is plummeting. It just went down 2.4% year over year after already going way, way, way down. So that inspires zero confidence. Everything about him that I've read about his ideas about public schools and testing and gifted and talented schools, he's moderated some of those positions, but like he just comes from this bad place that's already produced bad results on my kids. So like, no, I'm not optimistic about any of that. The housing stuff is kind of interesting. Didn't get a lot of national attention, but on election day, there are also 3 or 4 local measures here having to do with housing. And they were all kind of sold, presented, and I presume at least somewhat accurately as saying we're cutting down red tape to speed up the development of housing. It's all sold as affordable housing, but it's also just permitting on stuff and removing the veto that individual city council members had on projects in their districts. Sounds good. I even voted yes on a couple of them, and I almost never vote yes on proposition just because. Mamdani didn't reveal until election day what his vote was going to be. And progressives were all over him. They're mad. They're like, I bet he's going to say yes. That just shows that he's in the tank with the developers and stuff. And indeed he did at the very, very last minute because he's aware of who his base is, just sort of smuggled in the yes after he was safely a victor. My backyard here in Carroll Gardens includes Gowanus, where there's close to a dozen buildings that have been erected along the banks of of a horrible Superfund site full of dead bodies. And it has been a yes in my backyard initiative and a rezoning and a freeing up of zoning. And he has said in the past that he sees this as a success project. So I have some limited enthusiasm that he will be favorable towards doing tweaks that allow for the building of more housing. And he also thinks that the government doesn't have any natural limits. And I'm looking for ways to spend 183 days outside of the city limits.
Can I give you another line from that speech?
Yeah.
What's that?
The poetry of campaigning may have come to a close last night at 9, but the beautiful prose of governing has only begun.
Yes.
Hey, that's a good metaphor, right? You don't like it? Jerusalem, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, Matt, you know what's interesting? I've heard people react to that so differently, that line in his speech when he said there's like no problem too small or something for government. I thought he was talking about like potholes. What did you think he meant by that?
Everything.
Matt?
Like I genuinely thought he meant like I'm going to be like the mayor who's going to roll up his hands and like shovel the snow and take care of potholes. And then I heard a lot of folks on the right who were like, "Oh, this is obviously a line about how he's going to be big government." And like part of me thinks listening to what you said, because I think that's a very like reasonable reading of it. I don't think it's like an irrational reading of it that you're giving. Is that this kind of ambiguity is what makes him such a talented politician? Is that people can hear a lot into what he's saying, and that it gives him a lot of room to maneuver. My big question is like, how long can he maintain his credibility with the left without them, really coming after him, like, they did with Bill de Blasio, for instance. Can he govern in the way that he's kind of been indicating in the last few months of his campaign, that he's going to have like a big tent for a broad ideological coalition? Or is it going to be that he has to maintain the sort of like Brandon Johnson like Chicago mayor behavior? So anyway, that was just interesting to me because I didn't hear that.
I spent my life in mostly Democratic-run cities. I guess I was in Los Angeles during the tail end of Richard Riordan's career, sort of moderate Republican. But in that period of time, everybody whose politics map onto Mamdani, youthful Democratic socialists, by name or not by name, have used potholes as a laugh line to make fun of the local Paul, who is sort of moderate and all he cares about is potholes. I remember literally a cover editorial in an LA alternative paper saying, they just got a new city council that was like majority super progressive. And they're like, great. The last thing we need is to fix the potholes. And I was like living in a house with a pothole the size of like a baby elephant out in front of my front yard. And I was like, how about we just fill the potholes first before we get into your experiments?
Are you saying we need a moonshot for potholes, Matt Welch?
I'm going to never listen to another word that you say, which makes today even more different. I would love it if he says, look, hey, we're promising a lot, but we're going to fill your potholes. He has my attention. That's not what he's saying. That's not what he's going to say. And that's not clearly what animates him, I think, in the scope, especially of that speech, the latter half of which was him trying out to be the nation's foil to Donald Trump.
I also see that line as basically the kind of through the looking glass, or like the polar opposite of the Ronald Reagan.
Yes. Like
the most terrifying words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I see it as the opposite of the kind of like Ron Paul get the government out of the boardroom and the bedroom. Like I see it as the much, much closer to, in its best incarnation, most charitably read, it's government is the word for things we do together. And in its most terrifying incarnation, I think everything that you do is the government's business. Everything that you want to do needs prior approval. All things shall be overseen by me personally from the mayor's office. Like I think that's at least a historically literate and reasonable interpretation, if not necessarily what will happen. But.
Yeah, I guess the way I would put it is it's clear to me that he's talking to folks who care about quality of life governance and who view that as an issue that he is going to have to solve. He's not just going to be able to give big speeches and sort of pass sweeping, sort of like a Bernie Sanders type policy and then ignore the potholes. Or he's hearing that anyway. That is a part of the discussion. At the same time, you said you sort of you're not sure whether he's going to govern as a big government guy. And I guess I'm sure. Because where is the evidence? Make the case for me that it's even plausible to believe that he might not.
Well, it's not that I think he won't be big government. I mean, even New York is a massive government. I think almost anyone who comes in, it's big government unless you make that your one goal to reduce the size of what the government is doing. I think my point is more when I hear him talk about sewer socialism, or I hear him talk about delivery of services, the idea that affordability needs to be his level of message discipline is beyond that of Democratic politicians who've been doing this for decades. They could not imagine the level of message discipline this man has had on affordability. What that indicates to me is either this man is just a remarkably smart and adept politician and that's it. And he has he has a secret agenda where he's going to go full, socialist in City Hall, or that he genuinely does see that there's a muscular role for government in making people's lives better that is still constrained to schools and roads and transit and housing, etc. But that government can and should deliver those things well. And I'm not a socialist, but I am a liberal, and I'm a liberal in the Amartya Sen version of this, where I do believe that government should provide really great services. And I think I'm probably I'm definitely less libertarian than the three of you are. And I think that there's a world in which you could imagine the people he hires are not socialists either, and that you're not going to remake all of New York City government in this way. And so to me, it's it seems hard to imagine that he's going to be able to staff up New York City's government with people who genuinely want to just socialize a bunch of industries. And then the question is, does he have competent people or not? And that to me is, up for debate.
Katherine, where do you see this affordability argument going? Because it now seems to be the big buzzword that is sort of sweeping political conversation, both on the left and the right. You've got Trump saying affordability is a con. It's a new word that they made up, despite the fact that he ran on affordability. That was his successful campaign. And then he's doing all this stuff, right? He's going to have the Justice Department investigate meatpacking companies for collusion. He's going to reroute healthcare subsidies to American savings accounts. Maybe, I don't know. Right? I'm not sure that's actually going to happen. We get these $2,000 dividends from tariffs. Again, a thing that I think is maybe a sort of fake policy, but it's at least something he's talking about. So on the right, and on the left, I think we can prepare for a whole lot of the word affordability. Do you think that this is going to deliver actual affordability? Is there any kind of is there a way to do so here that politicians could actually take up?
I think there's two kinds of affordability policy. And one is, from my perspective, you do a bunch of things to free up markets to do what they do, which is improve quality and bring prices down. You, do more of the things that have made all the things that we like affordable for the last many, many decades, which is basically free trade, free movement of people, free market mechanisms. Or you do the thing that both Mamdani and Trump want to do, which is to borrow barrels of money and then roll the barrels of money into the street and throw handfuls of money around at random until the people who are standing closest to you feel like stuff is about as affordable as it would have been under that first system that I just described. And then it lasts for 18 seconds, but by then you are out of office and it isn't your problem anymore. And in the very, very short run, those things might get the prices of stuff to the same places. But one is an illusion and one is real. And both parties are participating in the crack-headed barrel of money version.
Yeah, I mean, this is my issue with the Obamacare subsidies is that if you go back to 2010 and the initial wave of subsidies, they helped drive up the actual underlying price of health insurance. There was a whole bunch of regulations that made health insurance more expensive, and then you add more subsidies on top of that to fix the problem caused by the first wave of subsidies and regulations, and you end up where we're at right now, which is a sort of nonsensical shutdown and an argument about this that no one really has a solution to. We are going to take a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to take a listener question about healthcare, actually. This show is sponsored by Donors Trust. Earlier this year, Donald Trump signed a new tax bill into law, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The law largely keeps Trump's 2017 tax cuts in place, but there are important changes to the tax code coming in 2026. That's next year. And that means your charitable giving before December 31st really matters. If you support local charities or libertarian nonprofits like the Reason Foundation, the Cato Institute, or others, then now is the time to think strategically. With the right planning, you might be able to reduce your taxes, simplify your giving, maybe even give more than you thought was possible. That's why our friends at Donors Trust created a Libertarian's Guide to 2025 year-end giving. It's clear, it's practical, and it'll help you take the headache out of your year-end giving and make the most of your philanthropy before the new rules kick in. Visit donorstrust.org/reason to learn more and download their year-end giving guide. That's donorstrust.org/reason. All right. We have a listener question here coming right up, but I just want to remind you, we love to answer your questions. If you have a question for us, please send your short, succinct, pithy, and not very long question to podcast@reason.com. And also, another reminder, next month, we have a webathon coming up, and you can ask us anything on a very special podcast that's going to be all your questions. So you can ask Katherine Mangu-Ward about her deadlifting routine. You can ask Matt Welch about Ken Burns and baseball and New York and the subway system. You can also ask us about public policy if that's what you want to know, but you got to put the word webathon in your email subject line when you send us your short, succinct, pithy, and not very long question at podcasts@reason.com. All right, this week's question comes from listener Wilco with a K, nothing to do with the band, who writes, "You've long advocated for true catastrophic health insurance, high deductible plans that cover only major events with patients paying out of care for routine care, the kind widely available pre-Obamacare. My pushback, those plans still exist. I have one, but they're unaffordable for most. I pay over $3,000 a month for a bronze level plan with an $18,000 family out-of-pocket max, far beyond what the average household can manage. You may have had a real catastrophic plan back then, but you're 15 years older now. Raises insurer risk sharply. Meanwhile, medical procedure costs have skyrocketed. Isn't the root problem not insurance design, but the inflated cost of care itself? Shouldn't we prioritize massively expanding the physician supply, doubling medical school enrollment, slashing licensing barriers, and fast-tracking green cards for qualified foreign doctors instead of fixating on insurance models? Jerusalem, do we need abundance for healthcare provision?
This is so funny. There's a really great piece we published by Lawson Mansell, who's at Niskanen, who is writing about what abundance in healthcare looks like. I think we've gotten a little bit too fast and loose with the word abundance, so I'm like team, like let's keep abundance to land use stuff, but I agree with all of his policy prescriptions, so I'll just talk about them here. I strongly agree that thinking about the supply side of healthcare is really important. I mean, I have a friend whose husband was a doctor in South America, like fully fledged medical doctor during COVID in rural Latin America, serving very high needs populations, doing like everything a doctor would do. When he comes here on a legal visa, he is not able to just like take a test and prove competency in medical knowledge and capacity. He has to redo his entire residency. He has to reapply, despite the fact that there's like a fixed number of slots, because the American Medical Association is essentially a cartel that is preventing a high supply of doctors from actually being able to work in America because they don't want the wages of highly paid doctors to come down. And so I think this is really, really important. I think there are a lot of things here beyond just increasing the amount of foreign doctors who can work here, but also just like increasing the number of residency slots, because there are lots of people who want to be doctors, who can fulfill the criteria and just can't do it because we've just artificially limited the slots. Also things like scope of practice, like lots of things that we go to our primary care physicians for, a nurse practitioner could do for cheaper, and we're just not allowed to. Like, there are state AMAs that like lobby against this in state houses all around the country. I think all of that is really important. I don't think that would like solve like the quote unquote affordability problem. I think healthcare is just like naturally kind of going to be a high cost sector for the United States. I mean, people are living longer and they're demanding more things. People are not just like part of what's happening is that costs are increasing because like you don't want to just like live from like 65 to like 70. You want those years to be comfortable. You want to make sure that you're getting your regular scans and you're getting your blood drawn. Like, these were not things that like people a few generations ago were doing. They weren't consuming healthcare at this level, and that's like a good thing. Like, I'm glad people are living longer and healthier lives, and they're able to get access to things that will make those end years comfortable. And of course, like long-term care, it's extremely expensive because you need someone taking care of you around the clock. So I think that we should just like expect that like healthcare will be a large and probably growing share of national income, and that we should just like be very, very clear when there are things that are artificially increasing the cost of that and be very aggressive in cutting that back. And so, you know, I think insurance design is a part of this, but I do agree that with Wilco, not with a C, with a K, that we do need to care about the supply side.
Matt Welch, first of all, what's your favorite Wilco album? No, the story that we're hearing here is that a significant, a non-trivial portion of the cost of healthcare is about immigration restrictions and about licensing. Do you basically agree with that?
I don't know, man. Isn't the
Thanks, Matt.
Isn't the you in this question Peter Suderman? Like, what are we doing here? Like,
if you're outsourcing your
1,000 articles about Obamacare and shifting subsidies. You had a really good rap before the last break talking about this. My presumption is, I went and Wilco with a K. I was very intrigued to learn about the expense of these premiums. So I went to try to just do basic research, being a 57-year-old man who would be presumably paying a lot of money for this. I'm like, all right, let's try to figure out how much it would cost me to do this. Granted, it's very easy to befuddle me. That's part of being 57 and part of being me. I couldn't fact check this claim within at all. I mean, just wildly divergent things like, oh, these kind of catastrophic cares are way under market. They're actually an affordable alternative, blah, blah, blah. Looked at it in some depth for some amount of time. And that suggests to me that some of the complexity in our healthcare system is a result of bad architecture, and that it's not enough to say, well, it's going to fix the small architecture here, but the big architecture in the middle of the room, we're talking about it too much. Let's go on to do these other things too. Yes, let's do those other things, but I don't think that's a reasonable trade-off for looking at the architecture themselves. If I must share a stupid personal anecdote, the complexity, I think, is part of the point that insurance companies do. I have an insurance policy where I think I have like a prepaid something or other, and they give you a card with the prepaid, and it's got like, it goes up to $5,000, and it's awesome when you go to the thing and you just pay it and it gets drawn down. I love it. It's great. And then there's another like 5,000. These are theoretical numbers. Another 5,000 that's dedicated to my family, my dependents, but there's no card associated with it. Instead, every time that they pay or I pay or whatever, you then have to just file an individual claim with a receipt into the back end of a portal thing. And as someone here who is on the podcast who approves expense reports can testify, the number of receipts that I paid for something in cash and here's my receipt and can you please pay me back that I have filed in 20 years, zero.
It's
just
horrific,
that's something
guys.
That's not going to be done.
Listeners, please
when you're building in
send
complexity
help to
like
me.
that. If you're building in that kind of complexity, it's done on purpose because they know they can make money off of me for not being able to do that. And that suggests to me it can't just be complete avarice. There has to be something in the design, I presume. But that's why we pay Peter Suderman to explain exactly why that is.
I would like to give Matt a -1, a deduction from his metaphor score for the architecture in the middle of the room. That's a no from me, Matt.
That is as clear as a bell.
But also, I think like your answer is sort of dovetails into what I was going to say to Wilco with the K, which is I think, sometimes libertarians say, or sort of free market healthcare people say, like catastrophic plan as kind of like a talisman, like, and then you just have a catastrophic plan and that fixes it. But I think that the thing that catastrophic plans do is get people more in touch with the prices of things. And that thing is really, really valuable. And Matt was just talking about, well, what even is the price of a catastrophic plan, which is a second order question. But when you have a plan like that, you become a price sensitive consumer of healthcare on the day-to-day level. And I think that that has to go with the supply side remedies that you mentioned, all of which I think are really good. People have to be asked, someone somewhere in the system with a personal stake in it has to be asking the question, is it worth the cost of this procedure for me to get this procedure? Just like anyone, anywhere in the system asking that question with their incentives aligned. And people who are on catastrophic plans would ask that question and do ask that question. Now, people with no healthcare also ask that question, but they ask it from a position too often of desperation with a medical bankruptcy right around the corner. And so the question ceases to be meaningful.
So I'll take this question because I am probably the person on this podcast who has written the most about healthcare. And I will just say, if the question is, should we deregulate medical supply? The answer is obviously yes. Let's just do that. It will help. It won't fix everything, but it will make some things at least somewhat better, and marginal improvements are good. But the other thing, to go back to my Obamacare rant, is that we should also deregulate health insurance. And this is, in fact, I think an underrated problem with Obamacare, is that Obamacare wasn't just a subsidy system. It also added a whole bunch of regulations to what health insurance has to be. And that has driven up the cost of health insurance. And one of the things that the Trump administration in the first term did that I actually just supported straightforwardly, thought was good, was they deregulated short-term limited duration health insurance. Those plans were derided by Lena Khan types and by sort of the Elizabeth Warrens of the world as junk insurance. That's what the Biden administration called them. But I will just read you what the Congressional Budget Office, which is not like a Republican hack think tank, right? It's just a bunch of government economists. They have written that 95% of STLDI plans, that's these short-term limited duration plans that are not regulated in the same way that Obamacare is, are comprehensive major medical policy that at minimum covers high-cost medical events and various services, including those provided by physicians and hospital. In essence, STLDI plans resemble a typical non-group insurance plan offered before 2014, when many Obamacare regulations took effect. You should be able to buy that insurance. It shouldn't be illegal to do so, and it shouldn't be illegal to buy it for more than 3 or 4 months, which is basically the standard that the Biden administration wanted here. Is like, you should be able to take on that risk. And this is what insurance is about. And this is again, that won't solve every problem. It doesn't even fix most of the problems, but it gets us a little bit of the way towards allowing people to have more choice and more options in their life when it comes to health insurance. And so deregulate supply, but also deregulate insurance. The Trump administration actually did that in just a little, but a good little way in the first administration. And I thought it was one of the things where I was just like, yep. Trump was right about this. Okay, let's move on to our final segment here, because we have a lib who likes libbing out, right, with us, but also someone who is the argument is how old now?
2 months.
2 months old. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It can hold up its own head.
That's right. I've really enjoyed reading the argument.
Thank you.
It is provocative. It's interesting. It is, sometimes I'm even jealous of it because it's like, you got something that I wish we had. In particular, 2 pieces that I want to point out. I believe it was the very first piece you published by Kelsey Piper that basically just ran down all of these attempts to measure the effectiveness of basically giving people money of a kind of of just sort of government programs that are welfare, that are just like, let's give people money with minimal strings attached. And it was so well executed, just like, well, $300. okay, we're going to try $300 and that didn't work. And like, you can know what the response is going to be from people who support these programs. It's be like, well, that's just not enough. And it's like, well, what if we tried 500? And the studies are pretty good. 500 doesn't do all that much either. Then we try $1,000. And it's like, still, the evidence is it's just not there. And it was so effective just sort of to see this all laid out. And it was the kind of piece that we often publish in Reason, which is, let's look at government programs. Let's look at the best evidence for them. And then let's see, do they work? And then ask, what do we do about that? And then the other piece was one that you actually wrote about your TikTok addiction, right? And why that wasn't necessarily a government problem, despite what someone like Zohran Mamdani might think, right? Like, you were just like, this is not necessarily something that we want public policy to solve. So I guess my question for you is sort of, why aren't you have said you don't think of yourself as a libertarian, but I've looked at those pieces and I thought, this seems pretty libertarian to me. Why aren't you a libertarian?
A big crash right when you asked that question. Appropriate, I think.
Sorry about that.
It was like a theme. It was like a sound
For people
effect.
who are not watching this on video, I want the listeners to know that was Matt, like a raccoon, just rummaging around in his own backdrop. So we'll get to whatever he found later. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So first, thanks for reading, Peter. I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, Kelsey's piece was specifically about UBI, and that was a big kind of push, particularly in like the 2010s. So you got to push a lot of government programs to establish a universal basic income. And my piece about my own TikTok addiction was, I was skeptical of that my addiction became a policy problem, and that there's so many things that we should think of trying to resolve before we get regulation. And at the core of liberalism, I mean, it's in the word, right? It's about liberty, it's about freedom, and I think that's something that like libertarians and liberals share, is they're very, very concerned about personal freedoms, very, very concerned about the government being able to intrude on them. Judah Shklar, who is like a prominent liberal philosopher. She escapes both Hitler and Stalin and comes to the United States and is a professor at Harvard. And, she kind of theorized on this idea of the liberalism of fear, where she, the idea is like people should be able to live their lives without fear of government intervention. And that is the biggest concern that liberalism has, like when the government can, as it happened with Hitler, as it happened with Stalin, actually take away the very basic freedoms that everyone would need to have before you even have like second order, third order freedoms. Now, I think we're living at a time where like looming rising authoritarian threat, both in the United States, but outside of the country too, and lots of other places like Russia and China, et cetera. Like, it is very clear that Judah Shklar was like, and like many libertarians have been correct, that there has been like an underappreciation of the threat of centralized power within the government. But I think that like the thing that stops me from being libertarians, I think that, as a lot of other liberal theorists have pointed out, there are a lot of freedoms that the government has to be involved in granting as well. For instance, the fact that, you could have all the theoretical freedoms you want, but like if women aren't allowed, or like every private institution that teaches, if private institutions are the ones that are able to hire doctors or whatever it is, and they just don't take women, like how much is that freedom worth to me? Like how much is my freedom worth to me if the government does not ensure that you don't get murdered for being a different gender identity? And like there are a bunch of different things that I think the government enables you to do. And I think by providing high quality education, by providing for even very poor people, by providing healthcare services like EMTALA, by requiring that if you are in dire straits that that like you are going to be taken care of in an emergency room, by requiring a certain minimum level of what a good life looks like, the government is going to help you provide. That is, I think, what distinguishes us from libertarians, is that we do believe that government can be a force for good in engaging in large sectors here. I mean, when we think about things like transit, like there's not really a country that delivers high quality transit at cost, at scale, without massive, massive government intervention in the market. I mean, that is not super libertarian. And this is true to me for like all of these major sectors: education, healthcare, transit. These are places where the government in many well-functioning markets is able to have a massive role. And so respect for markets is definitely something that we share as well. But I just do think that, I have more of an appreciation for what government can do.
Katherine, do you want to jump in here? And specifically on this point that Jerusalem makes at the end here, education, transportation. It actually seems like those are a lot of the things that people are dissatisfied with and don't work very well. And that is part of why you're more of a libertarian.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm a libertarian for many reasons, but one of them is, I think, an empirical disagreement about the limits of markets to provide many of those goods that you just described. And so, I think we can see glimpses either in other industries or in those industries of the ways that actually the private sector can and would do a better job of providing those things, of providing education that actually achieves the goals that people want to achieve with their education, rather than some combination of centralized distribution of government services and warehousing of kids and brainwashing to send them into the factories or whatever the kind of like boogeyman is of public education that you want to undo. There are many ways in which the private sector can and should undo those things. So I think a lot of my libertarianism does come from an agreement that those goods and services are part of living a good and free life full of choice and plenty, and that government failure to provide high quality versions of those goods is a case against bigger government. It's an incompetence case, among other things. Now, I also think you can start from first principles and say, necessarily a government provided good is undergirded by the fact that you had to take that money from people to provide it in a uniform way, maybe in a way that people wouldn't have wanted. So I think that sort of the taxation is theft of it all is probably the other place that we would diverge, and that is important to my libertarianism as well.
Matt, you live in a place where there's a lot of taxation. You live in a big government state because you live in New York City, and you choose to do that. It's not required of you. You've got the freedom to do so. And yet you were the editor of a libertarian magazine. You're appearing on a libertarian podcast right now. Reconcile this for us.
That's personal choice and freedom. I like New York. And
he loves big government.
It's tough to extricate. I just don't. I don't necessarily always judge a city by the politics of the neighbors that you find in that city. If I did, I might start going a little bit crazy, especially in neighborhoods close to me. But there's opportunities in the big city that are interesting. But there are times when I think about leaving, and I will at some point. And that will be that dysfunction. Is part of it. The costly dysfunction and the kind of arrogant ignorance that comes with it, the confidence of its the nobility of intent. I was rummaging around making noise like a raccoon behind us because I'd forgotten the name of Charlie Peters, who's the founding editor of Washington Monthly. Which arose in the early 1970s, one of the most influential journals of opinion that we've had in the post-war era. And he was a guy who was in the Kennedy administration. He helped start the Peace Corps. And he came to a realization that, hold on, you know what? Sometimes there's a gap between a program's intent and its like good heart and its actual outcome and output. And too often we measure things by the sort of the input of our morality and our intent and maybe the dollar figure associated with it. And we're not measuring this. And this led him to be kind of a co-founder of what back then was called, in a positive way, neoliberalism. Eventually everyone kind of escaped from that tag, and it's now mostly an epithet, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this was very bracing. And a lot of the writers who came out of that, your James Fallises, your Mickey Kaus, I think Greg Easterbrook, would then sort of like progress to the New Republic back in the New Republic days. And what they did is they formed a very bracing and evidentiary-based critique of largely, but not only, democratic programs based on results and not intent. And I keep waiting for some aspect of that to come back. And that, I think, holds the greatest promise of some of what we're hearing from the abundance people. There's a nod towards, hey, look, we have to have real world results. People are not getting their bang for their bucks from their local governments, and that's a serious thing. So what do we do to address that? That's great. I would note in passing that at the beginning of Ezra Klein's career. Ezra Klein is now, is the co-author of The Abundance. He interviewed Charles Peters and gave him a what for. It was like two ships passing in the night. Just like, hey, I feel like the whole neoliberal project was a way to kind of bash Democrats too much and bash the left too much. Don't you think you were sort of a handmaiden for the right in that sense? And I think that sensibility of thinking about the big partisan game first has been a long-term demerit for everybody in this country in every major political party, but also Democrats for a long time. There was just like, if your heart's in the right place, how dare you vote against this because people are dying? That's just what we've seen from a lot of people. I would love it to be more like, hey, we're going to make coalitions on this one issue, this one time with whoever's with us. We're going to make our arguments based on evidence and then our, pre-existing values and whatnot. And then we'll move on to the next thing. And we don't have to always do it with the backdrop of how does this affect the major team presidential race? So I look forward to that in some kind of future. And in the meantime, why do I live in New York? Because New York's awesome, dude. Why wouldn't I live in New York?
Yeah, along with the Washington Monthly, the book that I think about from the 1980s that's incredibly influential sort of on my thinking is Implementation by Jeffrey Pressman, the subtitle of which is How Great Expectations in Washington Are Dashed in Oakland, or Why It's Amazing That Federal Programs Work at All. This being a saga of the Economic Development Administration is told by two sympathetic observers who seek to build morals on a foundation. That is the real subtitle.
That's not a subtitle.
That is, in fact, the subtitle.
You just started reading the book. That's not.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds
but
like
it's a great book about how you get an idea and you have a program that's supposed to solve a problem, and then when you actually put it into place, it just doesn't work. So, all right, let's close out here. Jerusalem, you've got a panel full of libertarians. You've got an audience full of libertarians. What is it that you want to say from your perspective to the libertarian world? Should we be working together? Should we be kind of frenemies? I don't know. Like, what's your...
Yes, join us.
Yes.
I actually do really think that right now, I mean, at different moments in history, political coalitions shift, ideological coalitions shift a lot. I think the most salient issue today is really just how much power should the president of the United States have to act without legislative input? And how far can he go in intruding in the lives of regular people? And that's, to me, is a place where there's basically no daylight between liberals and libertarians on the overreaches that we're seeing right now. The open thwarting of the courts saying that he's not going to listen to them on SNAP. As we've mentioned now multiple times, I mean, I really do find this to be bizarre that we are just allowing the president with no clear legal authority to just kill people who are not proven enemy combatants in any sense. This is just, I just think that people are not reacting to this in the way that it should be. It's not okay for the government to just kill people randomly. You can't do that, even if you think there's a good reason for them to be harming the country. You think they're drug dealers. Maybe they are drug dealers. They could be drug dealers. You can't just murder drug dealers in the street. That's not a civilized way of having a government. And so, to me, I think there's a lot of room here for interesting engagement. I do think that in many ways, liberals and libertarians do really well in engaging with one another. I mean, to me, I agree a lot with what you all are saying regarding the failure of government services in many respects. I think you don't give enough of its due to what government has and can do. I mean, there are just a lot of people that exist who cannot fend for themselves. Children, elderly, disabled folks will always need some sort of assistance. And I think it's good that we have public taxation to take care of those people. And I think that it's good that when there are market failures, that the government can step in and provide those services. I mean, we're seeing this right now with Chinese solar panels. The reason why we have a free market for us of cheap and available solar panels that are now spurring a ton of energy production across the world is because a government stepped in and backstopped that and made sure that there was going to be innovation in that space. I think that's similar to what we're seeing in a lot of places carbon capture and storage or carbon pipelines or heat batteries. There's a bunch of innovation that the private sector often does not do. And I think this is a place where liberals really push libertarians to think through where market failures are and whether the trade-off of just allowing that market failure to continue is worth it if the government can be a helper here. So I think it's a very I think I've learned a lot from libertarians over the course of my life, and I really appreciate the impulse to question government capacity and competence. And I'm going to remain a bit more optimistic about its ability to make the world a better place.
All right. Speaking of market failures, I am going to share the movie that I watched this week, Predator: Badlands. Oh, man. In fact, okay, so let's go back to the original Predator here. Because the original Predator has the arms interlocking meme. That is the moment, right? It is it's Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, and they like do the biceps thing together, right? And Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of beats him, right? Because he's the bigger guy and the badder guy. And that's what the movie is about. And it's a whole movie that's basically about two guys. I should not say about two guys, but like the whole idea of the movie is when men walk into a room together, they're going to have to do the biceps thing, metaphorically or like actually with violence or with words or whatever, because they gotta know. It's a movie about toxic masculinity, but also kind of about how toxic masculinity is awesome. And like how you want to, right? Like you just want to be like that because you want to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1980s. And in the end, he finds the biggest and baddest guy on the other side, which turns out to be a big alien monster who's trying to hunt him and kill him. And he does have to take him down. So Predator: Badlands, 40 years later, nearly, is, I have seen it described as Predator Muppet Babies. And that's basically what it is. It's about a kid predator who's kind of sad, kind of weak. He's got some problems with his dad. I'm not making this up at all. Matt Welch, he's like, his brother's been sent to kill him. But it's brotherly stuff, right? His brother's not going to kill him. So he goes to the murder planet. I think it's actually called the Death Planet, to hunt the very biggest monster, and finds himself and like has a relationship with a found family that includes a robot who is a legless synth from the Alien series. That turns out to be related to the real bad guys who are actually the big corporations at the end. And it is just bizarre because this is a Predator movie that is cute. That shouldn't exist. It shouldn't. I mean, it just feels like some sort of strange abomination. On the other hand, it's actually pretty good, pretty cute, and pretty funny. So if Predator Muppet Babies sounds like your sort of thing, I guess I recommend Predator: Badlands. But I don't know. It just makes me feel weird that this even exists. Katherine, what have you been watching, consuming, reading?
Absolutely not that thing.
Yeah.
I read a novel, The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni.
Did you say all those words right?
I know, I think so. And
was practicing before the podcast.
I was practicing. I don't know how well I did. It's a retelling of the epic poem from which the Bhagavad Gita is drawn. And it's retold from the story of Draupadi, who is the queen. She's like born out of fire. It's all very epic. She's married to 5 brothers, and hijinks ensue. And it is, for regular listeners to this podcast, they will know that I cannot resist the retelling of a myth or some kind of like foundational civilizational story. And this is a great one. The structure is would be an abomination unto Suderman because there's nothing 3-act about it. It's this kind of meandering, unfolding, deeply weird story. The reason she's married to 5 brothers, for example, is she is won by one of the brothers in a kind of contest. He brings her home. He says, like, "Mom, you'll never guess what I brought home." And his mom says, "Whatever it is, you have to share it with your brothers." And then it's like, oops, it's his wife. And then they decide that like honor requires that she be married to all 5 of these brothers. That's just like where the story starts, right? So it's sort of this culture that is like heavily, heavily bound by honor. And the story is told in part through Krishna, who shows up periodically to remind our main character that her adolescent visions for herself may not have been the right ones, and that she may regret in all too short of order, in particular, a desire for vengeance. And I think that's a lesson we can all apply today. Don't end up married to 5 brothers because honor demanded too much of you, and don't desire vengeance.
Hey, that is actually like from a Predator movie.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, it's exactly the same as what Peter. So, The Palace of Illusions, I really recommend it, especially if you, like me, will always read a retelling of a myth.
Jerusalem, have you been watching a movie or reading a book you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have a great book that I think is actually, I came across it because the Institute for Justice, which is a libertarian organization that sues on civil rights and civil liberties grounds all the time, asked me to be part of a book club for this book called The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is a sci-fi fantasy kind of mystery novel. And I was like, when I first said it to me, I was like, why am I doing this? And they the author thanks me and Jesse Jenkins, who is a professor at Princeton, in the acknowledgments for helping him come up with one of the concepts in the book that I won't give away because I think it might give away some of what goes on. But it's actually, he's a huge lib, but also I think actually for our libertarian audience would be very, very interesting to like see the contours of what this version of liberalism, libertarianism looks like. So that's why Institute for Justice is interested in it. But the basic concept of the book, because it's not very like in your face doing politics at all. I think it just won the Hugo Award, actually. It's very, very good. Is essentially that there is a murder in this, sci-fi fantasy universe where it's very fun that they've like gotten really, really advanced in sort of like biological, messing around with, I guess like they've probably done CRISPR or something. Like they've done like a lot of DNA messing around, but they're like really, because you want to keep it like sword fighting, there's like absolutely zero like technological advancement on mechanical or physics things. So there's no cars, like they're still in like horses or whatever. There's still like sword fighting. There's no guns or anything. So so
instead of steampunk, it's like gene punk.
Exactly. That's actually really good. It is gene punk. But it's really, really fun. I hate when people tell me too much about mystery books in particular, so I'm not going to say anything else, but like the characters are very fun. If you like sci-fi, if you like fantasy, it's very, very good. I think it's great for libertarians.
This is perfect timing. This book literally popped up as ready for me to read on my Libby this morning.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I'm extremely hyped for it.
Yeah, I just added this to my Amazon cart. The description is a Holmes and Watson style detective duo take the stage in this fantasy with a mystery twist for the Hugo winner. Right. All right. I'm sold. Totally.
And I just finished the sequel. Sequel's great too. So lots to look forward to.
Matt Welch, what do you have for us?
I went and saw MJ the Musical on Broadway at the Neil Simon Theater. MJ being Michael Jackson. He was the king of pop. Mike Jackson, the dancer. It's great. I loved it. It's what do they call those things? The jukebox musical. Like do a musical Broadway thing about someone who is famous doing pop songs, and you'll hear all the songs and you'll feel great because you love the person. Well, at least love the pop songs. We're kind of maybe lukewarm about some of the aspects of the person. Just really great, really fun. Went there, brought my 10-year-old. She loved it. And it's just a great reminder of like Michael Jackson was really good. And they have 3 different Michael Jacksons, the little boy at the beginning of the Jackson 5 and the teenager and then the adult. And it's sort of set in randomly like the preparations of the 1992 Dangerous tour in Europe. And as he's sort of like trying to figure things out, the dancing and the set list and the songs connect him with different parts of his life and story, whatever. It writes itself kind of. And then there's like a MTV intrusive journalist who's trying to get stuff out of him. And there's the background cacophony of the weirdness of his life and the controversies of his life are there too. Doesn't solve any of those riddles necessarily. And it's mostly just like people who are really, really good at dancing and singing like Michael Jackson, which is a hard thing to do because he was great at these things. So if you like that stuff, it's great. Lighting is really good. There was a guy who, a lot of the characters, it's very clever. A lot of characters are playing 2 roles. And in particular, a guy named Apollo Levine, who has never been on Broadway before. He plays Joseph Jackson, the father, abusive father. And then also a guy named Rob, who is sort of handling the production of the Dangerous tour. And he could flip between the two characters at the drop of a hat. It just was really, really terrific. But go. It's affordable Broadway. I don't see a lot of Broadway, so maybe I'm easily wowed. But choked up a couple of times, as you can well imagine, Catherine. And it's really nice. You should go see it. MJ the Musical. The end.
I did not like Michael Jackson until I heard Thriller on vinyl on a really good sound system. And oh my goodness.
Let's see.
Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones, folks. He was good. He was really good. All right, folks, that is our show. Reminder, send your webathon questions to podcast@reason.com. Please label them webathon. That's coming up next month. Also next month, we have a Reason versus debate, December 10th here in Washington, D.C. Reason is debating breaking points on big tech. Look out for more details soon. It's going to be fun. As always, if you like this podcast, you can support us by going to reason.com/donate. That is reason.com/donate. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Jerusalem Demsas, for being on the show. So sorry about the bike situation, but glad you're better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I ran in once I realized.
Thank you all so much for listening. The Reason Roundtable will return.